Hello and welcome to the re-recorded version of our latest Community of Practice conference call. In this call, we're going to be focusing on expanding, developing your employer network, and we're really happy to have with us Valerie Evans from Catholic Charities in Onondaga County in Syracuse, New York. And so this is the re-recorded version. Unfortunately, our original recording, we had some technical difficulties with it, and so we're not able to bring that to you. But we're going to do our best to still present some great content and also ask some of the questions that were asked in the original webinar. So without further ado, let's get started. So I'm Daniel Wilkinson. For those of you that might not know me, I'm the Workforce Engagement Coordinator here at HIRE. And HIRE is a project of Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Services, and we're based in Baltimore. And with me today is Valerie Evans, as I just said a minute ago, and she's going to be talking to us about our topic today. So I'm going to hand things over to Valerie, and she's going to tell us a little bit about Syracuse, New York. Go ahead, Valerie.
Thanks, Daniel. Hi, everybody. So that is Syracuse that you're seeing on a very rare non-snowing day. That's the CYO on the left, where the Refugee Resettlement Office is. It's a historic preservation site, so we're not allowed to change it. The big brass letters on the front say CYO, which is how we're known. The north side of Syracuse has always been an immigrant neighborhood. In my grandparents' generation, it was German and Italian. You'll still hear it referred to as Little Italy occasionally. Interfaith Works, the other resettlement agency in town, is about 4 blocks up the road, and the biggest English language school is another 6 blocks up. So the north side remains a home for new Americans. Each agency resettles about 600, 650 refugees every year, and that is scheduled to go up even further this year. We're very cooperative, sharing employment grants between us, and it's not uncommon for staff to move back and forth between the agencies throughout their careers as grants come and go. We work with the same clients, we have the same goals. The economy in Syracuse still lags significantly behind our county, our state, and the nation. The cooperation between the people trying to put refugees into the jobs that are available increases our success rate hugely. We're one of the cities exempt from the ABOD requirements that just went back into effect because of our continued high unemployment rate. Some people do blame refugees for this, but the numbers show that while our clients need welfare when they first arrive, they are the population that removes themselves from welfare the fastest. And I'd like to think that's where my colleagues and I come in. So remember Alan making reference to this mysterious list that you could somehow acquire that was like the key to the kingdom of the hidden job market? We got it. I'm going to spend some time talking about what it is, what it's good for, how to get it, how to get your director to pay for it, and how to use it effectively. It's by no means a panacea, but it's definitely got its place in your toolbox. Every time a business forms, they have to register with the local government by submitting certain forms. They also approach advertisers, who then sell their information to advertising lists. Those lists, in combination with the business registration records, are essentially what you're looking to buy. You can get a small number of them for free at your local library, courtesy of the Reference USA database, but that small number is a catch. For us, it turned out to be the number of businesses in the smallest, most poverty-stricken zip code in our city, the one we're located in. It's 500. And that's the number I used to convince my boss to buy the real list. If the smallest, poorest zip code in our city had 500 employers, something we really didn't know, then there was clearly an untapped job market in Syracuse, and I wanted access to it. We ordered the list from infousa.com and had a pretty good experience. They encouraged me to customize the list so that I'd get the results I was looking for and walk me through how to do it. First, I eliminated anybody who employed fewer than 15 people. From calling employers on the free list I'd downloaded off Reference USA, I'd worked out that businesses that had fewer than 15 employees were mostly only hiring their families and friends. My second criterion was transportation. If it wasn't on the bus line, I wasn't interested. This required me to know our public transportation routes pretty well, but that's my job anyway. So I stuck to the 10 zip codes that make up the city of Syracuse, the cheapest bus fare. That got us to a manageable number of listings, maybe 10,000 or a bit over. With the nonprofit discount, we paid $640 and change. You can also limit it by how well the business is doing, which is reflected in their sales volume, or choose only specific industries like hospitality, retail, medical, whatever you like. So the list is best used for prospecting cold calls. You can look for businesses in the neighborhoods of your clients and just start calling and asking, do you have any openings? Who's the hiring manager? What's the position and pay? And have you advertised this position yet? Or you can use it to target specific industries if you have clients who really want to go in a specific direction. We do this a lot with higher skilled clients that we would traditionally think of as being picky about jobs. With the list, we've expanded our knowledge of who's out there and how much business they do. It used to be that if you weren't a big name employer, or if I didn't pass you while driving through the city, I didn't know about you. Now we have access to smaller businesses who need people and niche businesses who have needs that match the skills of our more skilled clients. This has been a huge help with medical professionals who are looking to work in a medical field again. I have one client, Abdikadir, who is known in the community as Dr. Somali, because he's a Somali guy who spent 15 years in Kenya working in the refugee camp hospitals. He worked in several different specialties and happens to have very good English. We kept sending him out to interpret for other clients at their medical appointments, and when he was looking for a job himself, he said, I'll do anything if I can do it in a place where medicine is happening, because this is my experience. This is what I know. I called around to a few places I knew, but nobody was hiring, so I checked the list. Sure enough, there's a dentist office in Syracuse where the hiring manager's name is listed as Asa Abdallah. And I know from the address and the fact that they take Medicaid, Medicare, that they have to have a lot of non-English speaking clients. Good place to start, right? He's immediately interested in having someone with a medical background and brings him in as a dental assistant. It didn't matter that Abdikadir had never worked in a dental office before. It was similar enough. And he wanted someone who could communicate with all these refugee clients he's starting to see. The position wasn't advertised. I didn't know anyone there. But thanks to the list, I managed to access an opening that nobody else knew about.
All right, thanks, Valerie. We're going to ask a couple questions now. And so the first one is this list that you were able to purchase and use that was so helpful for you. Was this just a Syracuse thing, or is this available nationally as well?
No, this is available anywhere in the U.S. It's really available worldwide. Anywhere there are businesses seeking advertising, advertisers are looking to make money off that fact. So InfoUSA is the one that we use, and that's an advertising warehouse. You can have it for anywhere in the United States.
Okay, so there may be some other companies as well, but InfoUSA is certainly one good option in your opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Great. What about the list price? What tends to be the average price for purchasing this list?
There isn't really an advertised price for the list, because the list, they sell it by the number of listings that you purchase. So Syracuse is a pretty small city, so we had a fairly small price. I don't even want to think about what the price would be for New York City or Los Angeles or any other really large market. But when you buy the list, I wouldn't ever recommend buying the list of every business in any market. You want to customize it for what you're looking for. Like for me, places that are large enough that they have to go beyond their family and friends in order to find employees, and places where you don't have to have a car in order to get to work. That narrowed it down right away.
Yeah, that's great. So, there's new businesses that are opening all the time, and there's also businesses that are closing their doors. What about updates to the list? Do you get updates periodically? How often do they update the list? Do you know any of that information that you could share with us?
I know that with Info USA, there are a couple of ways to do it. You can subscribe to them for a monthly fee, or you can order a one-off. We ordered a one-off to get the whole list all at once, and we would have to ask for an update, which would cost less than reordering the whole list. But with thousands of employers on there, I don't anticipate us needing to reorder or update the list for a few years. I know I'm not going to go through 10,000 employers with a 4-man employment team anytime soon.
Yeah, and that's actually a perfect lead-in to the next question that I have, and this is one that I just popped in my mind. But what about time for doing this prospecting? I mean, with a 4-person team, and so you've got the list. That's one step. You spend money on the list. How do you go about tackling, even with you know, the way you narrowed it down? It sounds like you had a large number of employers to contact. So how did you and your team divide up that list or approach systematically getting through that list?
We use the list in a very tactical way. I said it's very good for prospecting. We do cold call prospecting when it's slow, when our normal employers are not calling us because they don't need to hire anyone. So that is dead season work. Otherwise, the list is primarily used to help us access jobs for our high-skilled clients who don't want to do the work that our normal employers provide. It lets me access nanotechnology jobs. It lets me access skilled industrial work. It lets me access medical companies, positions that wouldn't normally call the refugee resettlement centers as places to recruit.
So that sounds awesome. I could definitely see some people maybe taking this to their supervisor or to their director, and you know, presenting this possible strategic tool, and maybe getting an answer like, well, why spend money on this? Can't you find this information for free on Google or in the phone book, or you know, maybe other types of lists are free? What would you say to that, or how did you make that argument?
And that is exactly what my executive director said to me. And I said to her, you know what? You're right. I could find every single one of these 10,000 listings through a public record search and through Google, and to find one of them and get the name of the hiring director, the direct phone number for the hiring director, and all the information that I need probably give me a day to do all of that. Maybe less if it's a really well-known company, maybe more if it's not. Let's work this out in man-hours for 10,000 companies. And now let's see, do you want to pay $640 and change, or would you like to pay my salary and the salary of the 3 other people in the department for 10,000 records? And then it became a simple matter of what was more financially available and how many jobs did you want us to find for our clients.
Yeah, great. Well, thanks so much for asking those questions, or for answering those questions. And yeah, hopefully that gave people some good insight on possible prospecting tools. What we've heard in the community practice, and as I've talked to people around the country, is that for most people around the country, targeted prospecting is what makes sense, whether you use a list or not. You know, the random prospecting or random lead generation, where you're basically really trying to find the hidden jobs, you know, like a needle in the haystack, can be valuable depending on your location. Like even what Valerie was saying about being in a struggling economy. I've talked to a few other people around the country that are in struggling economies as well, or their main problem they're trying to solve right now is getting jobs that are closer and accessible by public transportation. So in those cases, the more random approach might be effective, but it seems like it makes a lot of sense to really be focusing and keeping in mind your client's skills and aptitudes as well as you choose which employers to reach out to. Has that been consistent with your experience, Valerie?
Absolutely. And it's been very helpful with some of our populations coming in with a higher degree of education, some of whom have been resistant to spending some time in an English classroom because they've already spent so much of their life in a university. They want to go straight to work. If I ask them to go to 6 months of English class so that they can work on an assembly line, they're extremely resistant to that. If I ask, and earn minimum wage. If I ask them to spend 6 months in an English class so that they can work in a nanotech job and earn $11 or $12 an hour, now that's a goal they're willing to work for.
Yeah, great. Well, thanks so much. We're gonna move on to the next section on needs analysis, and this needs analysis meeting and strategy is really what people around our network has said has been the most helpful thing about this whole model. I think we already knew that we needed to not necessarily make the charity pitch and beg people to hire refugees, that we needed to, as we say here, hire speak employer and focus on their needs. But I think this model gives us even more of a framework and more of a structure to do that. But it's also needed to be adapted a little bit. And so I'm going to let Valerie talk about how her team has adapted the needs analysis.
Okay. The needs analysis. Look, in jobs development, as in clothes shopping, almost everything will require some alterations to fit you properly. So that's exactly what we did with Alan's needs analysis. When we tried it straight, we found that employers ran out of patience with us taking up that much of their time. And frankly, we found that we could analyze their needs and make them feel heard in half an hour. When we pushed for an hour, employers were less responsive and also less participatory. The general feeling was that we were trespassing on their time and not showing enough respect for how busy they were. Also, I found it's just never a good idea to give the impression that you yourself are not busy. Use your judgment to know if you're going too fast or going too slow. So we found that 3 is the magic number. If an employer wants to chat and go into depth, that's great. I eat it up. Most part, they appreciate it when we try to move quickly and ask incisive questions that cut to the heart of their problem. What are the 3 most common reasons that you have to let people go from this position? What are the 2 qualities you must have to start in this position? What do you need your workers to know or know how to do before they start? These questions probably matter more to the employer than to you, because you've heard the answer 100 times and can reliably predict the response. But the employer is not used to being asked these things, so they're very important questions to him. By and large, we found that the set-up half-hour version of the needs analysis is working better for our employers. We try and couple it with a tour of the site whenever possible. In my initial conversation with the employer, I always ask for a tour. My line is, well, I would love to meet with you and if possible tour the store, the factory, the site. It's one thing for us to talk about it, but if I can see it and see people doing the job, I can get a much better idea of who will work well here. The needs analysis fits in very well to a tour, and the questions you want to ask will occur pretty naturally in that setting.
Great. Hey, Valerie, I'm going to interject here with a quick question on needs analysis before we move to selling. As you and your team have tried this, what have you found that your team has struggled with or really been helped by with the needs analysis?
Well, as we bring new people on, we're a growing team. So as we bring new people on, the idea of doing the needs analysis all at once and remembering to have that in-depth conversation is always a struggle for new people. I find that a new employee is constantly calling the employer back to ask him more questions. So we've certainly had that happen. Another issue with the needs analysis has always been making sure that they're not trying to squeeze in a picture of a candidate that they really want to place, because they do work so closely with the candidates, and that they're truly listening to what the employer is telling them is important for this job, and not thinking of how they can shoehorn that one client who's been out of work for too long and is a really great guy and really needs a job into this position.
Great. Thanks. So at some point, after you understand the employer's needs, you're going to move on to actually making your proposal, to proposing a solution. So I'm going to hand things back over to Valerie now and let her talk about selling.
Yes. What I want you to remember about selling is that you are not selling your client. You are selling yourself, your team, your pre-employment education program, your follow-up process. And you should have started talking about this as soon as you met the employer. This is what separates you from a temp agency or a friend's referral. You are offering follow-up support that no one else does. If you can possibly achieve this at the end of the needs analysis, I highly recommend it. Remember that the solution to the problem is not the candidate. The solution is you and your team. Never let the solution be the candidate. The candidate is a human being the employer is going to see 5 days a week. He's got a complicated life. He has children, parents, health, school, all of that, and it can impact his work. The solution you are presenting is you, your team, interpreters, your pre-employment process, coaches, case managers, all of that, and your follow-up process. If you allow the solution to be the candidate, what happens when his daughter is sick and he calls in? But if you were the solution, he would call you and give you a chance to solve the problem. So in this regard, I'm talking about my solution all the time, and it's definitely how I close out every needs analysis. But eventually you do have to sell them on your candidate too. I recommend doing a formal interview, even if the boss says they're willing to hire anybody you send. We should all hope for that. It's just better for our clients long-term to learn how to interview with a stranger. We actually have a class for this, where people from the business community come in once a month and conduct interviews with our clients and then give them feedback, just to shake the jitters out of them and give them practice dealing with people in suits who speak like most Americans speak. I know that I personally speak like an English teacher when I talk to my clients, and that may not be what they find in the interview. We had so many clients who did great when they were practicing with us, but they froze up in a real interview that we had to put this in place. They were just too familiar with us for it to feel real. So I highly recommend a real interview. It's also what we found most employers want anyway. In the consultative selling model, they say that the interview will become a formality because they trust you so much. And we do have some employers who simply hire anyone we send. But that's not the way to start with a new employer. And we're job developers. We're always talking about how to get new employers. After I told the employer on the idea of hiring refugees who come through my program as a solution to his current problem, I will come back maybe a day later with a particular client and remind the employer of what he asked for in the needs analysis. Okay, you said you needed somebody with open availability who has no problem cleaning in a dirty environment. Is that still right? Or, okay, you said you need somebody reliable and trustworthy who speaks Spanish to care for an elderly Puerto Rican lady in the morning. Is that still the priority? When they confirm that, I'll highlight my client. Okay, well, Anya is a single woman with a wide open schedule who worked as a hospital housekeeper in the Ukraine. We discussed the job duties you told me about, and she says that she'd be very interested in the position and that she's done this kind of work before and never had any problems with how dirty it was. Shall I send her resume over to you and we can talk about a time for an interview? Or, okay, great, because Janet lady was a nurse in Cuba and she's interested in a part-time job so she can do a CNA program in the afternoon. Would you and your client like to meet her? Closing. You must always ask for the hiring decision. They won't always give it to you then and there, but you have to ask. I have two main strategies for this. If things are going either very well or very poorly, I'll ask the client at the end of the interview to wait for me in the hall while I talk to the employer and ask for feedback and an immediate hiring decision. Anything is better than waiting. If you know your client didn't do well, get feedback and go back to the needs analysis of the boss to address where your client didn't fit the bill or what he did in the interview to make the employer suddenly discover a higher priority need. The other option, if he's giving me signals that he needs time to think, saying things like, well, let me get with my co-manager, or I have some other interviews scheduled, I'll ask, so when should I expect to hear from you? Just like I would if it was me on an interview. Because this is my personality, I'll often say, so at what point should I start bugging you if I haven't heard from you? Because I know how busy you get here. It's important for the sake of professionalism that you follow up with this and make him tell you yes or no when he said he would. Your client has the right to an answer. And if they didn't get the job, they have the right to learn from it and learn where they can improve for next time, because there will be a next time.
Great. Thanks, Valerie.
No problem.
You touched on this a little bit as far as you gave some tips on the actual making the sale and the transition from needs analysis to selling, but could you just elaborate a little bit more in your experience, kind of what does that transition usually look like? When is the right time to make the sale?
The right time to sell them on your program is every time you talk to them. You need to be highlighting why working with you is going to solve their problems more effectively than going to a temp agency, putting an ad in the newspaper, or asking their current employees for referrals. You need to keep reminding them of the problems they're currently facing with their workforce and how your process is going to eliminate those problems, or if not eliminate them, minimize them. The time to come back with a candidate and start selling him on this person, start telling him on Ahmed, start telling him on Yenis Lady, is when you have gone back to the office, gone through the files, talked to your client, and made sure that he is in fact interested in this job, understands what it will be, and is not going to put you in the embarrassing situation of bringing him to the interview, getting a job offer, and then saying, no thanks, I don't want to work here. Yeah. So maybe 2 or 3 days after you've been there to sell him on the program, after the needs analysis.
Great. One of the questions that came up last time on the original webinar we did was, with all this focusing on employers' needs and, really wanting to meet those needs and serve them, there are some employers that they might hire clients and then they might start calling you for every little problem and, maybe asking you to do things beyond your capacity to do. How do you handle that, or how do you avoid that problem? Any advice?
Oh, Lord, yes. I have an employer who pretty much wants me to replace both his supervisors and his human resources department. I always say that this is better than the employer who never calls me and just fires my people out of hand. It's a better problem to be overutilized than ignored. So I have to sit down and talk to this guy and say, I'm glad you are so constantly in touch. My worst fear is that I would never hear from you again, and I have no idea how my guys are doing, if you're happy with them. I am happy to arrange interpreters for your new training. What I need you to do in order for this to happen is to bring all the guys who speak Arabic in on one night so that the interpreter only has to be disturbed at one time because, I have to be respectful of her schedule. And then we'll do the same thing for all the guys who speak Spanish and the same thing for all the guys who speak Nepali. because, you know, I have to be respectful of my interpreter's schedule as well.
Thanks for that great answer. What about objections? Inevitably, either during the needs analysis or when you come back and you have a solution, maybe an employer is 75, 80% there, you know, but they're just not quite there. They still have some hesitations, and maybe it's the English, or maybe most of their employees have cars and your client doesn't. You know, maybe it's you know, most of the time they hire men and you're suggesting a woman, whatever it might be. How do you, or how has your staff been able to handle those objections and still kind of persuade the employer to move forward?
Oh, if they're 75% unconvinced, that's an issue. If they're pulling out by a quarter, that's a big challenge. If they're 90 or 95% there, that's not such a worry. But if they're holding out by a quarter, I have a lot more work ahead of me.
Yeah.
That is probably
my number might have been too low.
Yeah. 75%, I'm not full on them yet. At 75%, I worry that my guy's going to get there and the boss is not convinced of him and he's not going to give him a fair shot.
Mm-hmm.
But if they are 75% convinced, but their worry is they've never had a woman in this position before, I would say, okay, I can be free Wednesday. How about you let me try this job for 4 hours, and we'll see how I do. If their worry is low English, then I might say, okay, why don't you walk me through the areas where you are most concerned about low English? I will bring the kind of client with me, not the client, but the kind of client. He's already working, he's on his day off, that I might suggest for this job. And we'll see how you think that he does, just on a tour of this faculty, to look at it and view the job duties. And we'll see what you think.
Yeah, and I think it also gets back to that sort of confirming the needs. You know, they might throw objections at you, but you know, you can always circle back to, okay, well, you know, let me just confirm that these are your needs. This is what you said, and this
exactly
client fits that and has those strengths. So, you know, why don't we give it a try? Let me ask you one more question that hopefully won't be out in left field too much, but it is a common question that we actually get a lot here at Hire. And I don't know that it's so much to do with selling, but you know, what about when you do sell an employer on a client, and when the client seems like the perfect client, like they're going to be the all-star client that you're sending in there, and then they do something stupid, and they show up to work late on the first day, or they maybe they are having a little more difficulty understanding instructions, or you know, and you get the call from the employer, okay, you know, your person's been there 2 or 3 days, and we're not so sure this is going to work. How do you handle those types of situations?
Oh, Lord, I had a couple of those happen within the last month. Thank goodness they were with, this comes back to the strength of my relationship with the employer. I had one guy who thinks that I don't talk to the other job developers in Syracuse, and luckily we have very strong relationships between the agencies. He accepted a job from me, and a week later accepted a job from Anna over at Interface. The two are on conflicting schedules. So he had just been showing up to in the morning to the job he took from me, saying, I'm sick, and making his boss feel required to give him the time, and then going off to the job he accepted from Anna. So the boss he had the nerve to come in and say to me, I don't get enough hours at the job you gave me. I think I'm going to look for something else. So I called his boss and I said, you know, Louis is very concerned about hours. And he said, Valerie, if Louis wants more hours, he needs to show up. So I called over to Interface and I asked Donna, and she said, oh, he never told me that he was already working. So we both brought Louis in and talked to him about the need to tell your job developer what's really going on, because now he has lost 2 jobs. And far from having 2 jobs, he now has 0 jobs and 2 job developers who don't trust him. So because we communicate back and forth, and because we communicated very quickly with the employer, decide and tell the employer what was going on and put someone else in. Another situation we've seen happen is someone has very good spoken English and they're able to read and write well enough to get through our English program. They pass our written test. But when they get to, say, a nursing home, the language is not more difficult, it's just very industry specific. The employer calls me and he says, Valerie, this guy can't read and write English. What were you thinking sending him here? So I go out there and I help him and I say, okay, he actually reads and writes English very well. The problem is, let's look at these terms. These don't show up much in normal English vernacular. So if you give me this sheet, I would be happy to put this in more common spoken English for him, and then I don't think we'll have a problem. So a lot of it comes back to constant communication. I never let a week go by where I'm not in communication or one of my staff isn't in communication with both the boss and the client.
Yeah. Thanks for those great answers. It's really cool to hear about the experience of your office, who really has just started implementing these things over the past several months. This is an ongoing conversation for all of us. What from consultative selling model, what do we implement? What do we kind of take from the book? And what do we follow? To the letter, and what do we adapt? And then also maybe what does this model not even include? And so what do we need to expand on? As far as where your team is at right now, what do you think the next steps are for your team in continuing to implement this or adapt this further?
I think the one thing the consultative selling model is missing, or at least that we didn't get to talk about much in Nebraska, is the follow-up step. That has been the most important part for our team in terms of retaining employers, has been that constant communication with the employer. It's that follow-up step that means that when our guys screw up, our organization is not blamed for it. They see it as, okay, this guy's life was a little bit too complicated, or he's simply not interested in this job after having tried it for a couple of weeks, and they come back to us for another person. Because we are so attentive to them, they don't see it as a reflection on our agency.
Great. Yeah, and that's actually a perfect setup for me to say that our next call is going to be on June 9th, and same time that it usually is, 1 p.m. to 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we're actually going to be focusing on that step, on follow-up, on finding effective and creative ways to strengthen employer relationships, and not just do the bare minimum 30, 60, 90 days, check the box type follow-up, but how do you actually keep employers engaged and, over time create environments within employers where refugees succeed. So I hope that you all can join us for that next call. And I also wanted to just throw in a reminder for our online forum. It's a group that was started when we launched this community practice back in January, and this is where This recording will be posted. It's where the slides from the original webinar are posted, and it's also an opportunity for you all to engage with each other, to ask questions, to start discussions. You can write your own blog posts if you want. We're still trying to get momentum with it, so I'd love to see a lot more engagement. Since this recording is actually just between me and Valerie, and you might be listening to this after the fact. Maybe you have questions that you want to ask that we didn't answer in this recording. So the Torch group would be a great place for you to post those questions and start those discussions. As always, we're here to support you. The hire team consists of Laurel Donahue. She's the program manager. Myself, I'm the workforce engagement coordinator. Sarah Vale, she's the network engagement coordinator. And I also put Valerie's email address there as well in case you want to follow up with her personally about anything that she shared. So that's the end of this webinar, and just want to give a huge thank you to Valerie, not only for presenting the first time, but presenting the second time so that we could make sure that we got this content out to you all. So thank you, Valerie.
Oh, happy to do it.
And to all of you out there listening, keep up the good work. All right, thanks, guys. Talk to you soon.